Settle down, bro.
Scared. Welcome. No, you say to the show. Oh man. Ironically, Phil still managed to interrupt the flow of the intro.
He did
because he's not here.
I was waiting to hear the short little Phil section, and
I know
it wasn't there.
He's rude. He decided to help a buddy put in a motor, a boat motor.
Okay.
And if you've ever done any mechanical work, it never goes as planned.
No.
So,
nope.
So he's either gonna not be here, or he'll show up mid-episode and then he'll be here, one way or the other. So until then, Mike's here, and
hello. We're
gonna have a good time. And man, we were in the weight room together. We were doing chest day, and man, our conversation got deep.
Yeah.
During that workout. So much so that we were forgetting how many sets and reps and...
Yeah, we kind of lost track of time because we were just... We went into a deep conversation.
It was good. And there was a couple little nuggets from that I kind of wanted to share on the podcast. And so... But yeah, before then, we decided to change things up a little bit with the energy drinks. And then Phil isn't here, so we can't do the competition, I guess. So I know we still could do the competition. He just... It's true. Forfeits his points, right?
Maybe. Or we give him half a point?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah. But currently, Mike, you are in the lead 2-0 for the rest of us.
Man.
You won both of the last weeks. I don't know what your form, the form that you have when you open is different.
I've been on this earth longer. I've been opening cans longer. Man. I don't know.
It just sounds glorious when you listen to it. Like literally, I listened to both episodes with Courtney when we were driving to Rapid City, and both episodes, Courtney looks and she's like, "Yeah, Mike won that one," and I was like, "I know, it sounds so much better." But all right. So competition, we decided this week, instead of doing the roulette by different flavors, we would do the roulette by different brands.
Yep.
And then because Phil wasn't here, we just picked which ones we wanted to drink and gave him the...
But don't tell Phil. Don't tell Phil.
He'll only know if he listens to the podcast. But I got the Welch's Grape Ghost, which is like my favorite ghost drink. It's so good.
And I got the Grape Smash First Form. I've never tried it before, so I just wanted to try something new. First
Form, I've only drank... I don't even remember what flavor it was of First Form, but I think you'll like it a lot, actually. But let's go ahead. Competition.
Okay.
You go first.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good one. That's gonna be hard to beat. All right, I'm gonna.
It's the anticipation. It's that pause. All right. That's what's doing it.
I'm changing my form up. Okay.
All right. Stretch.
I can't lose. I can't lose 3-0.
Make sure you stretch out your popping finger.
Yep. I'm stretching. I got to pop the knuckles. That probably didn't sound good. I apologize for that. All right. Here we go. I'm going to extend my arms out a little bit so my voice is going to get quiet. All right. Ready?
Ooh, yeah. I will forfeit my points for that one. That was
noise
pretty.
Afterward.
That was pretty.
This is the form. It's the form. I want to get First Form as a sponsor. They sponsor like everybody. And they don't sponsor us, and it makes me sad. If First Form sponsored us, it would be tough. I keep talking about how like I want to get sponsored by an energy drink company because it'd be cool.
Right.
But actually, I don't know if I would, because then we would have to drink that brand's energy drink and not any other brands while they were paying for the episode.
Or maybe we start a bidding war. You know, they had
that would be all right.
You know what I mean?
Like, hey, First Form already gave us $50 and a free energy drinks for a year. So what can you offer? Maybe.
All right. Well, this one's pretty good. It's not as in your face grapey as some of the other ones that I've tried. You know, I like to say weird things when he takes a drink.
It's not so bad.
We're going to get more energy drink in the nose if we're not careful.
Oh my gosh. I listened into last week's episode. I'm really glad I wasn't drinking anything when I listened to it, because I was gut laughing listening to that the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was cry laughing. We listened to it in my truck on the way out of town, and I mean I was cry laughing. It was like my daughter was dying. She was just ridiculous.
Oh man, if you haven't listened to it yet, even the first 15 minutes, man, it was so good. Yeah, no energy drink up my nose this go around, but probably only because I wasn't drinking when you said grapey.
In the ancient days of giants, when the earth was wild and free, a creature roamed the valleys, cloaked in mystery. Is he born of angels' blood and man, a Nephilim so tall, or a shadow of the fallen, yet he the maker's call? He's a biblically accurate Bigfoot, with a lineage from the skies. Not a myth or legend, but a truth that never dies. Is he a remnant of the Nephilim, a titan standing tall? Or does he have the word of God upon him, the last to hear the call?
But so when we were working out, one of the things that we talked about was we were talking about different podcasts that I've convinced you to listen to.
Right, because I was not a podcast. I don't know, because I grew up in the 80s and there was like talk radio.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminded me of, was long trips with grandparents listening to talk radio. And I was like, no. And so I didn't even really give any of them a try. So,
yeah. I see, and like, I started listening to books when we traveled long distances, and that got me into listening to something other than music, because I love music. And so like if I'm going to drive like from here to Crawford or something that's only going to take, or Alliance, I'll listen to music the whole way, because it's an hour or whatever.
Yeah.
But if it's longer than an hour, if it's Rapid City or if it's Denver or something like that, I've got to have something more than music, because eventually my brain starts just tuning out the music and I get tired.
Right.
It's almost the rhythm, even if it's like crazy music, eventually I'll just start drowning it out. So the long trips because we have to drive for work clear across Nebraska quite a few times going into Iowa. And I started listening to books, and then that got me into podcasts on the shorter trips.
Right. And ever since I've, started listening to this podcast, when I'm out of episodes to listen to, I start asking for recommendations and stuff, because same thing, like makes the trip goes so much faster when I'm, and I'm a talker. So, I'll be talking to the family, and my wife's trying to read her book on her Kindle.
Courtney
and the kids are watching their videos, and they get so annoyed when I'm like, hey, and I try to get their attention.
Yep.
And so I can argue with the podcast, and they can all have their earbuds in, and they don't have to be part of it. So,
right. Exactly. Well, that's actually a fair point, because how many times when we would drive to Fort Collins or whatever together, we would literally not have music on, and we would just talk the whole way.
Yeah, we put music on and we turn it down, so it was just like background, and boy, we would have some conversations. Like
great conversations.
Yeah,
that's honestly probably where my desire to do a podcast probably was, created, was from those conversations I used to have with you.
Right.
Because,
and there's so much therapy in having conversations with people you trust.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of just therapeutic, health.
Right.
And that's been documented forever that, that's a big thing. Right. And so for us, going through trauma and things that we did as kids, us having each other to just bounce ideas off of,
right.
I mean, that was huge. We used to do that all the time.
Yeah. And then I feel like as we grew and mature, and I grew up, because, enough older than me. You've always been more mature and all of that. But as I started maturing, I feel like our conversations got to a point where we could disagree a little bit in a non-confrontational way.
Right.
And I really valued that. And looking back, we had a lot of conversations where we very much didn't agree on things. And early in my emotional maturity, I'd get frustrated because you disagreed with me. But as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate the disagreeing, because I think one of the most dangerous things we can be as humans is existing in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Because echo chambers they magnify, they can magnify very toxic opinions.
Right. And I echoed your frustration too, because, I was older and I was, in my own mind, I was the expert and I knew things and, I was guiding you. And then when you got to the point where you started questioning things and maybe not agreeing with what I was thinking and started challenging my thought processes, that was frustrating at first. But then as you got older and you started a family and everything else and there was just, there's just a respect in it. And I don't know. That's why I think disagreements are great when you keep that, the respect has to be a big part of it.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. That's very solid. I'm in a group it's a pastors only, or it originally started as a pastors only group. Those of you guys that have ever heard me complain about this group, you already know what group I'm talking about, because I actively engage in it encompasses everything from theological to political to just anything and everything is allowed in this group. And the idea of it is it was intentionally designed to get us to conversate. But the problem is that very quickly, the people who disagreed with, who would disagree with me, for example, did so vitriol. There was so much vitriol in it. There was just an animosity, an anger with it. Just why don't you, you're so stupid that you believe that way.
Right.
So then you start responding, and I respond quicker than I should to those. And so I don't think through my thought process. So my quote unquote argument looks really sloppy. Because I just respond because I'm frustrated. Yeah. And I got into a big back and forth on there and it was about immigration, because as I even just said it the last week, my viewpoint is I think we need to be spending our time and our resources on making immigration faster, cheaper, and easier. Right. I think we need to spend all of the resources we have, let's get people here legally.
And real quick on that topic, if you've never had the chance to look at the hoops that people have to jump through in order to gain citizenship in this country, most actual citizens can't pass those tests.
Oh, they're crazy. Yeah.
Most people born in America cannot pass those tests. Yeah. That's how difficult it is at this point. Yeah.
And they're not, it's not a good system.
No.
And so that's my viewpoint. That's always been my viewpoint. And so you want to start talking about anything immigration, I'm going to talk about that because I think that's what's important.
Right. And I agree with you.
I'm going to completely ignore the other part of the conversation 9 times out of 10 because I think that's the most important aspect. And so I was trying to express that. But anyway, and so it came off really sloppy, and then I got really frustrated because I was just like, God, goodness.
Well, and that's what happens when you get frustrated. You start your conscious brain, your part of your brain that analyzes things and has the right answers stops working, and you just resort to wanting to call names and wanting to tell people how dumb they are, and that's natural,
and
100% natural.
And so now I run things through when I start to get frustrated, I'll run things through ChatGPT and be like, tell me does this sound stupid? That sounds dumb. Yeah. And ChatGPT, if you tell it to be brutally honest with you, it'll be brutally honest with you. And it'll be like, yeah, this is a really underdeveloped thought. I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to post it.
That's good.
But in real time conversations, I think it's so important to be able to have that. And this is so out there random, but to have somebody you can trust that you can disagree with because you're not going to resort to the frustration, as you're still going to be able to think through, and they'll give you the space to think through your response.
And I appreciate you challenging me because, I come across as being an expert in most things that I do, even when I'm not trying to be. Yeah. There's like for some reason, it's the way I carry myself or something. There's this high level respect where even if I'm looking for a disagreement, I rarely find it.
Yeah.
So an example I thought of a couple weeks ago, it was hilarious. We were at this conference for counselors, and the main speaker got up there to talk about positive and negative emotions. Mm-hmm. And right away, I'm sitting at the table, and they're the big tables, like a dozen counselors at it, and they're all asking me lots of questions, like they usually do, because they know who I am.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with that right away when we first went in there, and she said that. I said, I disagree that there are positive and negative emotions. I think emotions just are. Emotions just exist. Like Martin Luther King Jr. wrote his greatest speech on his angriest day. So you can't tell me anger is a bad emotion.
Right.
It's how you use those emotions. There are positive and negative ways to use those emotions, but she was breaking them up into positive and negative. So right away I was disagreeing. Mm-hmm. They tuned her out, and they started asking me. And I was like, okay, we need to be listening to the speaker.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. So then she did this thing where the speaker said the word important, but she said it important. She said it important, which is one of my big pet peeves. And Tanner knows this, that people that say the word important make me crazy. It's just one of my pet peeves. And so I didn't want to be alone in this. So knowing how brains work, I waited for my opportunity. And the speaker said, okay, so we're going to talk about frustration and anger. I want you to share with your table something that frustrates you. So I took the table right away, and I was like, when people say important. And they're like, what? I said, listen to the way she says important. She says important, and that drives me nuts. And so I left it. So every time, and she said it with every sentence. Now, this is really important for you to listen to. And so every time she would say that word, everybody at the table would look at me and give me this look. And so I would just smirk and smile and be like, sorry, guys, I messed with your brains on accident. Yeah. So I'm in an online class 2 weeks later. And one of the women that was in our group is in this Zoom call. And we're talking about how our week went. And she's like, well, I can't sit next to Mike anymore at conferences because he ruined the whole conference for me, because now all I can hear is the word important pronounced incorrectly. 2 weeks later, it was still bothering her. And I put that in her brain. That's, you know what I mean? And so
absolutely.
Finding people that disagree with me on things is hard, because people trust what I say. People think that I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And a lot of times I like to think that I do, but there's times when, I appreciate somebody saying, wait, let's rethink that, you know, and you do that for me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think it's important. Now all of our listeners
they're going to be all thinking about how they say that word. I guarantee they're all in their vehicles or with their headphones in, trying to think about, how do I say that word? Yeah.
Just because I'm competitive and I want to one up you on this, not really, but one time in college somebody turned to me and they were like, I don't really like these green beans, and I was like, why? And she was like, because they're squeaky against my teeth. And ever since then,
I heard that squeak when you said that.
I cannot eat green beans that squeak against your teeth.
That's awesome.
It broke me. And before that, I didn't it was like I preferred ones that didn't squeak against your teeth, but I didn't know why.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But then when she vocalized it, now I can't eat squeaky green beans.
Why is complaining about something so, it catches on? You know what I mean? It's so
like glass shatters or whatever. Yeah. It forces your brain to think
Interesting. Yeah.
Goodness. I'm sure most of our listeners now, our active listeners, have probably started noticing the energy drink sections a little bit more.
It'd be kind of fun as if they got on the Discord and listed some things that, their little pet peeves, and we have a little conversation. That'd be kind of fun to see what bugs people.
Share, Share, if you're listening to this right now, get onto the Discord and share what is that that thing, like Mike said, and saying important. And my
that was perfectly mispronounced. I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I gotta intentionally mispronounce it. Squeaky green beans. That's a weird, totally weird, not totally not related, because that's what this podcast is. I still struggle with saying the word magazine.
Oh, I know. I was going to bring that up.
I still say mazagine because phonetically it's easier for me to say as mazagine.
Yep.
And so
every time I see a magazine, your face pops in my head and the word mazagine pops in my head because you said that for years and years.
I'm a
years
grown man and I still say mazagine and I speak for a living.
Yeah.
Like I literally get paid to preach sermons and I still struggle with the word. And like I almost just said mazagine because it's magazine.
Right. Yeah.
That it should be mazagine.
Yeah. That's interesting. And we all have words that do that to us. They trip us up. Yeah.
There's this game called 7 Days to Die. It's like Minecraft for adults, basically. So it's like realistic graphics, but the same premise. You build, and then there's creatures that you got to take out.
Okay.
There's a map on it called the Navazgine, and it hurts my soul because I struggle with Navazgine. And so I can't say
when you said that made my eyes squint because I was trying to figure out what that was rough. That was hard to say. I could feel it.
It hurts me. It hurts me so
That's
much.
Awesome.
But anyway,
that is great. That is great.
Because I probably distracted you. Go to the Discord. Write down what is that thing? What is that glass shattering, annoying, pet peeve of yours?
Yeah.
I want to hear your guys's. I want to know how you guys tick. Man,
good stuff.
That was a good intro.
Yeah.
But all right, so to transition a little bit into the meat of the show, the one last thing that I did want to talk about from our weightlifting session was the concept of fallen angels and salvation, and we talked about how the enemy and the only reason I want to talk briefly, and I want to I do actually want to keep this a little brief, is that recognizing that the enemy exists in a different realm in a way that they have demons have perfect memory, basically.
Right.
That they don't suffer from age and, our brains forgetting things and having to prioritize things in order to exist and all of those things. And not only that, so they have perfect memory, but they also have thousands of years worth of perfect memory since they were created.
Right. And that's just our understanding. This is what we were talking about in the gym too. That's just our understanding of time because, depending on your belief system and things like that, most people believe that they don't exist within time, that time is a human construct, but they've been around since what we conceive as time.
Yes.
Yeah. See, so we get deep in the gym.
That's actually something just popped into my brain that we didn't talk about in the gym is, so people talk about how the demons they're not omnipresent like God would be.
Right.
They're not everywhere. However, if they're not bound by time, they could almost fake omnipresence by traveling from one place to another outside of the restrictions of time and appearing in two places almost simultaneously because they're traveling without the restriction of time.
Yeah.
So they're not omnipresent, but they can fake omnipresence.
Right.
And I think that the evil in and of itself, I think demons, whatever, however you want to classify it, I think the bulk of everything that they do is in mimicking things that God is capable of. Like when you look at, even within scripture, if you look at the plagues, the magicians mimicked the things that God was doing. And I think there's so many different things that they try to do. And, but anyway, sorry, that just popped into my brain that they're not restricted by time. They could theoretically appear in two places at once, even though they're not. They're just having a conversation and then splitting it and having a conversation and splitting it back and forth.
And have just like this metaphysical thing. Yeah. So, and just we've never talked about it on the show before, but Tanner being a pastor, and I am not traditional Christian at all.
I guess we haven't.
And we've never really talked about that. It's just kind of how we do things. But that leads to a lot of our deep conversations because I take a very scientific approach, but at the same time, I'm very, very spiritual. Yeah. Okay. So my personal beliefs, I believe very strongly in angels and demons and, being where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be, God's plan. I believe in all that. I pray heavily, like I pray a lot. But the traditional church and things like that, that's not my jam. And so we do have a lot of great conversations like that. So I have a great angel story. You want to hear my angel story?
Yeah, sure.
So, and I probably told it to you before, but I don't know if I've ever like broke it down before. So when our mom was really sick and she went and lived with our sister up in Montana for a little while, and there was a medical emergency where I had to fly up there and get her and bring her home.
I remember that because we were debating on which one of us was going to be able to go.
Right.
Yeah.
And I ended up being the one to go, and it was a crazy, so it kind of set up how crazy this is. It's a funny story now. At the time it wasn't very funny. So I go to fly up there and I get stopped in tiny little Alliance Airport, and they pull me aside and they search me for contraband. Right?
See, bro, you got that name.
I know. So people that know me, like we talk about people respecting me and looking to me as a leader and things like that, and just naturally when they get to know me. But first glance at me, I mean, I'm a big guy, bald head, tattoos, full sleeve tattoos, things like that. And I get pulled aside. And so I get up there, I get our mom. And she, at this point, had so many medical issues. Tanner can attest that, like, she, mentally was barely there. Physically, even less.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
she was in a rough place. Like, barely even knew where she was.
Yeah.
Lucky if she, I was glad she recognized me. That's how rough her health had gotten at this point. And so I pick her up and get her to the airport. I didn't pack any luggage or anything because I was just going up, getting her, and flying back. So coming back, getting back on the airport, they pulled me aside again and went through security again. They did the little dusting on my hands to check for drugs, things like that. They did all that stuff. Meanwhile, our mom is going through, she has lotion, she has scissors, she has fingernail files, all this stuff in her bag. They pull it out and they pull me aside and question me why she's carrying all this stuff. And I just looked at her and was like, what are you doing? You can't bring all this stuff on the airplane. And they packed her bag back up and gave it to her and just said, well, go ahead and get on the plane. So here I am getting patted down and everything else. And they let her have all this contraband just on the plane.
Just have it back.
Right. Now, this was a rough trip. So then we get to Denver and I have to get her all the way across the airport. And there's no little vehicle transport things available, right? I am so frustrated, probably the most frustrated I've ever been in my life.
Absolutely.
Like at the point where I am just standing in the airport praying. Like I'm getting teary right now.
Yeah.
Because it was so stressful.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm getting emotional.
You're good. I'm going to start crying too. I don't.
So I sit down and I pray and I look over, and one of my best friends from when I was a kid is sitting like 2 chairs over, and I hadn't even seen him, and I hadn't seen him in years. And he just happened to be in the Denver airport on the same flight and talked me through it. That's what angels are to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. In scripture, it does talk about that whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. And people have entertained, it says people have entertained, angels and never even knew it. And that's real, man. I think it's real.
So angels and demons to me, and you would agree too, because you've seen things. They're not just this idea, they're, to me, they're real. They're here. They're doing things,
right.
And they exist in the most unexpected ways. So, yeah.
No, for real. And that's, and I believe there are moments for me when I came to Christ and I became a Christian, you knew me before I was a Christian.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you knew how critically, even before I was a Christian, how critically I thought through life and experiences and all that stuff.
I remember at one point you being so angry that people were trying to help you. Like you were angry. I know the school, the college, like reached out to you and like we're trying to help you with your mental health stuff, and you were angry that they were wanting to help you. You know, that's how deep into, you know, some of your stuff you got.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And I'm a very critical person, and still even today, part of the reason I love this show is because I get to bring you on the journey of how my brain works.
Right.
You know, like that's really, if we were to truncate this show into a tiny, tiny little box, it's Tanner bringing two friends on a journey, you know, my friend and my wife on a journey of how my brain works that they already get to experience. And now you get to hear it.
Right.
Kind of
exactly.
thing. Yeah. And I don't think through and I don't process through things in a way of like, oh, you told me this, so now I'm going to trust it. Like I have to think through it. I have to analyze through it. I have to then think through it again. I then have to experience it. And then I will begin to formulate an opinion on this.
Right.
I don't just instantly come up with ideas. Like I wrestle because but anyway.
Yeah. And I like getting together with you because we might, you know, my friends and family, a lot of times I try to get these crazy conversations going because I have these crazy ideas and they're kind of just look at me and, you know, they give me the eyebrow and say, okay, cool. And they want, you know, they don't want to play the game, and you are willing to play the game.
Oh, absolutely.
And everybody around us just kind of, I don't know, they kind of laugh and they, you know, they think it's kind of fun that we do that. We do that everywhere. We do that at family reunions. We do it. Yeah.
Half the reason I even go to family reunions is literally, if you're not going to be there, I'm like, don't really want to go.
Yeah. And we spend the whole time just talking.
And we'll drag other people into the conversation, you know, and it's it's a lot of fun. But if you're not there, you know, there's nobody else in the family really on at least on my dad's side that engage with me the way that you do. Right. Yeah. On mom's side, I feel like there's a handful that do.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, all that to say, you know, when my process of coming to faith, you know, I talk about, when I share my testimony, I talk about the moment, quote unquote, where I became a Christian, I gave my life to Christ. But the reality is it was a process. And that process started when I went to jail. And the very first thing that I did when I got to jail once in the morning, once I was like awake and they were like, nobody's coming to get you. I was like, cool. What am I going to do? And they're like, you can come pick out a book. And they have like this little library thing. And I saw the Bible there and I was like, you know what? Like clearly I'm making some dumb decisions in my life. I should probably read this, you know, like literally I'd never, you know, and I had gone through the catechism and all that stuff through the Lutheran Church Alliance. And so like, but I was not a Christian, and I that wasn't my tendency to go that way. And so I started praying and just asking God for help. And then you know, then there's these moments where I bring up the moment where, the evangelist Eric Tim, I've told you this, I think, but he paints a picture, and preaches while he's painting. Right. But he's painting it upside down. And so you're sitting there. And so if you didn't know he was painting it upside down, you can't figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I've seen the video.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the heck is he painting? And the sermon he's talking about is, you know, you have these images of who God is and who Jesus is based off of the experiences you have of other people telling you who Jesus is, the other people who telling you, and that crazy aunt that, and he, you know, he talked about like the crazy aunt that claims Jesus but acts like a demon, you know, like, and we've got relatives that were like that just put a sour taste of what Christianity was. And then you have the you know, and all this other stuff, and then the dry church that you went to, or this, and then he's like, but my challenge to you is to say the prayer and allow God to show you who He is, and allow Jesus to paint His own picture in your life. Right. And in that moment, I was just being honest, I was pretty distracted, because I was trying to figure out what the stupid painting was. Right. Yeah. And so he says that, and he's like, if that's you and you need to allow, you know, Jesus to paint His own picture in your life, go ahead and stand up. And I was like, what? And I leaned over to my friend. I was like, what did he say? And they were like, you should stand up if like, you know, you should allow Jesus to repaint Himself in your life. And I was like, I guess that's me. And so I stood up. And when I stood up, I was like haphazardly standing up. I wasn't even like drawn into this sermon. I was like, I was distracted by the painting, dude. And so I stood up and I was like, and then the second I fully stood up, this just feeling, and the only way I can explain it is just pure peace, just oh man, I'm going to get teary-eyed because I'm experiencing it. Yeah. And it just, in the first time in my entire life, I felt peace. And I start bawling. I'm tearing up right now, even just remembering
this is an emotional episode.
Apparently, this is what we're planning on talking about.
I know,
but this is what this is like you our conversations.
The other side of who we are. Yeah.
And so I stand up and I just start weeping in just this piece of just like I've never felt, and I could feel. I mean, even right this moment, I'm remembering it, and I could feel it, and I can feel it right now. And just this peace just came over me. And I was like, instantly, I was like, whatever this is, I want more of it. I want all of it. I want this all the time in my life. And I look over and my friends, they're just bawling. And I'm like, why are you guys crying? And they're like, I don't know. I feel great right now. And so for me, I was like, whatever this presence is that I'm feeling, it's not just me. It's something exterior that is giving me this feeling, because my friends and random people next to me are bawling too. Can't explain it. And then he flips the painting over right that moment, and it's Jesus on the cross. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not see that was Jesus on the cross?
Yeah.
And then he said, and basically he said that, I can't remember exactly how this sermon went, but basically it was like, once Jesus has revealed himself to you, then you truly get to see, what he did for us. Yeah. And basically. And so there I was like, all right, you know what? No, this isn't a moment. And that wasn't the moment I gave my life to Christ. That was the moment I said, all right, Jesus, if you're the real deal, you're going to have to show yourself to me. You're going to have to make sure I know that you are real before I will do this. And I continued drinking. Literally, I didn't change my life at all. I just prayed. I was like, God, show yourself to me. And then over the next 3 months, there were things that just periodically it would happen. I would have those experiences. And so, me coming to Christ was that just, it was a process. And then there was a moment at a conference where the pastor was preaching, and he basically said, his name was Sean Smith. He's an evangelist as well. He's phenomenal. If you ever get a chance to listen to Sean Smith, I think you would enjoy his preaching style. He's from California. Awesome preacher. But anyway, he basically was saying, he's like you, and he's like looking directly at me, and he's like, you were in control of your life and you fumbled it. You can't handle your life. And now you're saying you've allowed God to, and anyway, he was speaking to me basically. And I was the only person who gave my life to Christ at that point too. And so he was talking to me. And so that was another confirmation of like, there's more here than just my experiences with this, and kind of how to connect it back to what you were talking about. It was at that moment where you because he was there. Did you say his name? No,
we can say his name. Okay. He's my best friend when I was a kid, and he's still a really great friend of mine, Jamie.
Right? Yeah. So then that moment where Jamie is there, and it's at that moment where, and for me, looking at that from the outside, I think it's a very clear indication of that there's more to this picture than how you're experiencing the world.
Yeah.
There was an orchestration there.
Just it's more than just odds, at that point. I needed somebody in that moment, and it wasn't like he just appeared out of nowhere.
Right.
His whole plan was set where he ended up sitting in that chair, 2 chairs over, in a random city.
Right.
When I needed him most, there's too much design to that for me to look at that and say that's just coincidence.
Right.
In general, I think you and I, that's where we meet in the middle in our spirituality too, is that we we look for those miracles. We look for those. Yeah. It's just too much coincidence. Yeah. You know, we both look for those things, and we share those things, and we talk about those things. Macy is an example. My daughter Macy that we've talked about. She's a perfect example. Like Beth and I, my wife and I, we were trying to have, you know, a third child, and her body just kept miscarrying. And the doctor said, this is just going to keep happening. This happens. Yeah. You know, sometimes the body decides enough's enough, and you're not going to have a kid. And so we decided to try one more time. And if you don't know, I don't know if I mentioned on the show, Macy was born, she only has one hand. But talking about to the doctors and things, they said what happened was that Beth's body tried to miscarry again, and for whatever reason, Macy fought through that and said, you know, not today.
Yeah.
You know, and she survived that. And so the odds of surviving it, I've done all kinds of research on it. The odds of having the birth defect that she has and no other medical issues is like 1 in 10,000 miscarriages.
Wow.
They survive. Wow. Now, the fact that it's her left hand is 30,000.
Yeah.
You know, so just the odds of her being here. And if you know Macy, like she just changes a room when she walks in.
Yeah.
You know, she just has this peace to her. So, yeah.
For sure.
So just miracles everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we experienced that when Bryson was born.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to get into details because I want Courtney to be able to have the opportunity to share that if she wants on a podcast without robbing her from that.
There'll be a good time for that. Absolutely.
But Bryson is a miracle. He is a miracle.
Settle down, bro.
Scared. That's not. I kind of want to leave that in now. Whoa!
That broke the.
Oh my!
Broke the tension a little bit. All right,
that was great.
All right.
Oh man, but yeah, we were getting too serious for a funny a funny podcast. But yeah, no, he's a miracle, and yeah. And I feel like that miracle hit a little different being the dad.
It's different when if you never experienced it, there's no way to describe like how, you know, it makes it real. Yeah. It makes, you know, the big picture of things, you start noticing things when you, yeah, definitely.
When even being in the NICU, I had dads reaching out to me and they were like, hey, my kid was in the NICU. I get it. Like, talk to me, you know, and not having, and before I had been through the NICU, and then now having been, you know, that Bryson had gone to the NICU, that experience is an experience that you, unless you were there, you don't feel it. You don't know. Yeah. You don't know. You can't really grasp it.
Well, and think about just being a man, being a dude, like the expectation to just be strong, and just not break is so high that, I don't know. It's difficult. And we're taught from a very, very young age, you know, all men are that, you know, you got to be tough.
Yeah.
You know, you can't be emotional about this. You've got to be the rock.
Yeah.
And it's a tough spot sometimes.
It's really difficult.
Yeah. And so you need other men, you know, because I mean, there's something to, you know, with your wife and your other kids and things like that, but something about other men that get it.
Yeah.
You know, there's sometimes, you know, so sometimes you just got to reach out.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm not going to mention his name on the podcast just because I don't know where he's at with me mentioning his name. But, you know, one of my friends that's a Chi Alpha director that had reached out had a profound impact on me and the conversation and just the communication and just checking in and being there. And it did, and I agree, it made such a huge difference. And somebody who had been, you know, been in my walk of life as well with career and all of that, and it was perfect. It was, you know, just being able to have that conversation. I was so grateful.
Yep. I think of it. So, I came across this idea of, you know, men being taught to be tough and things. I mean, we have all been around it, but I was like trying to think, where did that come from? And it comes from different places, like, you know, your you know, generational passed down that, you know, you got to stop crying, you know, stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about kind of deal. And also, like, I found a book. It was, do you remember the Little Critters books?
Yeah.
with the little porcupines and stuff. Yeah. There's one where he's crying and he says, he's standing there and the words say, I wanted to cry, but I didn't because I was strong. And I'm like, that's teaching little kids that it's not okay.
Not okay to cry.
That you got to be tough, and I don't agree with that. There's times when you got to just, you got to have the right people around and,
absolutely.
And just let things go,
Dude, as being, I am a crier. Like,
me too. Me too. And I'm not afraid to cry.
When Chi
Obviously.
Alpha, when Chi Alpha first starts in the fall, I will typically explain to the students, be like, just so you know, when I get emotional, even while I'm preaching, I'll just cry. I will cry in my sermon.
Yep.
Just give me a second. It's okay. Crying and all of you guys, and I'll literally go through that. I'm like, all you guys who, if you've been taught that crying and getting emotional and is wrong, I'm just going to be in your face. And I'm going to tell you no, it's okay to cry. In fact, I think it's healthy, and,
and I run the jiu-jitsu gym, and the littles and they're the little kids and stuff when they cry. The question I ask is, your body hurt or your feelings hurt?
Yeah.
And I asked them, I said, both are important.
Right.
Both are important. Right. We got to work through both of, I try not to make it a tough guy sport, so I'm like, what hurts? What hurts? Cause I can fix both. I can help you fix both, but I need to know which one hurts.
Yeah. That's solid. That's solid.
Just something I picked up and started doing. Yeah. But cause I didn't want it to be like that. I didn't want it to be stop crying and toughen up kind of sport for those kids. But
for sure. So this is kind of, I guess you don't have to answer this, but so spiritually, I would identify as a Christian,
right?
Or the term Christian has almost been hijacked in America.
Yeah,
everybody who, you're it's almost become a heritage rather than a belief. And so I might,
right. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
I might asterisk it with I'm a Christian, but it's but I believe in Jesus. I follow in Jesus. And
right. So an example of that, I was raised Lutheran.
Right.
That's a way of saying I'm Christian, but does that really mean you are a Christian? Right. Yeah. I get you.
And I think especially Catholicism in America is very much that way.
Yes. Yeah.
You're Catholic, and then it's are you Christian?
And you're born into it. Yeah.
So how would you identify, what do you identify in your faith as?
So just, I don't know. I found so many, in my own life, cause again, I don't like to tell people what to think and that kind of thing. But in my own, faith and findings, there were so many contradictions in what I was being told and what I was reading and what I was seeing, and there was just so many, the dogma of it and the tradition of it and everything else. And Sundays when we go to church, but the rest of the week we're partying, that kind of idea really kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
And just,
I would say same.
So as far as Christianity, I 100% believe that Jesus taught a great spirituality, a great way to just be the best human being you can be.
Right.
I think as a teacher and things, he was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But as far as Christianity and things like that, I believe in God, and I believe in all this spirituality stuff. But I don't necessarily, for myself, don't believe that Jesus is God. Okay. I think that's where the line, the difference is.
And that was, and I knew your answer already, but I think for me, we had some decent conversations, and that's where I don't even remember if we explicitly had this conversation. I think we did. I think it was when, I think it was at Taylor's wedding, maybe. But that in my opinion, that's the differentiating point between being a Christian and not being a Christian.
Right.
Is I think in order to be a Christian, you have to believe that Jesus was God and that he did die for our sins and he did rise again.
Right.
And that he was God before, right. That he was.
And so for me, it's a confusing, for a long time, it was a confusing thing for me because I believed in the Christian ideals. Yes. I believed in being a good person and that Christ's teachings are how to, it's like a how-to manual of how to be a good person and create a world where just good exists.
Yeah.
And to avoid all those pitfalls of evil and things like that. Right. But for me, like reading it as a historical, analytical, scientific kind of person, to me, Jesus was a really cool person that had the right answers, but to call him God was hard for me. So that's kind of where I was at with it. Yeah. So, yeah. But I respect it. I 100% respect, because I get it. I get both sides of things, but yeah.
Well, and I, as a Christian and as somebody who does believe that, I also believe that one of the most important aspects of sharing faith, sharing, my beliefs, is we have to be very, very careful that if somebody disagrees with us, that we cannot take offense with their disagreement. Because if we take offense, we're basically creating a wall, and there becomes a superiority or a I know more than you, or I'm right, you're wrong.
One of my biggest pet peeves in the world is when I am having a disagreement with someone and it goes south, and their answer to me is, "I'll be praying for you," and they walk off. That makes me crazy. And I know that's not a Christian thing. I know that's not, but using prayer as a way of winning a conversation really bothers me.
I can typically, okay, I have to put it this way. I was talking about that group on Facebook of pastors.
Yes.
They're pastors or former pastors.
Right.
And a guy reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I think you argue like crap," basically is what he said. And I was like, okay. And he said, "Just because I want to be sympathetic in case you're going through something, I'll be praying for you." And I was like, instantly, that told me I now no longer need to be having conversations with you about this because you are using prayer as an insult.
Right.
And you're weaponizing elements of our faith. And that's not biblical. That's not Christian. That's not Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Jesus didn't, when the rich young ruler, when he was like, "Well, to follow me, you'll have to sell all your riches." And then the rich young ruler was like, "All right, well, I'm out." Jesus didn't, as he's leaving, didn't go, "Oh, just so you know, I'll be praying for you."
Right.
I'll be praying for you.
Yeah. And so
he's like, "All right, cool, go."
So within Christianity, like I said, when people say, "Do you live a Christ-like life?" I absolutely try to do that. Mm-hmm. I follow his teachings. I do those things. Yeah. So it's a tricky question when somebody asks me, "Are you Christian?" Yeah. So I usually tell people I'm a highly spiritual, non-Christian, but let me explain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's extremely important as Christians to, if you want to share your faith, to not be afraid to engage in these conversations. Like I engage with you in these conversations.
Absolutely. We talk about this a lot. Yeah.
And technically speaking, we'll put the quotes here. Technically speaking, I am evangelizing to you by having these conversations.
Yeah.
I evangelize to my family all the time. I have these conversations with you guys all the time.
Yeah.
Because I really believe what I believe.
Yeah.
But I don't, and I hope, maybe you can speak for me and speak for yourself on this, but I hope that I never am shoving, and I'm never offensive, and I'm never, "Well, I'm right, you're wrong."
No, not once.
Because I think the bulk of people whose family members absolutely refuse to come to faith or whatever, I think the bulk of them had a family member who was that.
Right.
Who was condescending, who was, "I'll pray for you," who was, "Oh, you're wrong. But Jesus is the way,"
right.
and we are to be offensive in the sense of I'm offensively sharing the gospel. I share, we have these conversations all the time.
Yeah. Offensive from a sports kind of, not offensive.
But not offensive in a sense of,
I see what you're saying.
Telling you you're stupid,
right.
Absolutely. Or weaponizing prayer or, but at the same time, when things come up, we dialogue, we have conversations, we pray for each other. And it's,
I prayed for you this morning before I came up here.
I appreciate that.
I
did not pray for you this morning. In fact, I had a rough morning. I prayed for myself.
Well, it's interesting. So talking about everything. Well, talking about listening to God in the universe. Something told me this morning that you needed some prayers. Yeah. So I didn't tell you about it. I didn't reach out to you and be like, "Hey, I'm going to pray for you because I feel like you're having a bad day."
Yeah.
It was just this feeling that I had. something telling me that you needed some prayer this morning. And there you go.
Oh man.
So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Cause I did. I really did because, and I'll just briefly explain it. Just our oldest, Bennett, he had a rough night, and he's not sick or anything. He just had a rough night. And because he had a rough night, I had a rough night. Right, and when your kids have rough and they get cranky and cry and grumpy and I only got like 3.5 hours of sleep last night. So then I'm cranky and grumpy. You tend to wind each other up, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was really trying to struggling to hold in my frustration, because I'm not frustrated at him, because I know he didn't get a crappy night of sleep on purpose.
Yeah.
He just got a crappy night of sleep, and now his emotions are compromised because he has no sleep, and he doesn't know why he's
being the parent of a toddler. That's
and so I'm not mad at you. I'm just upset. But you can't differentiate the difference between me being upset at you and just being upset. And so now I'm trying to keep my cool with you, even though I'm upset, so that you don't feel like I'm upset at you.
Yeah.
And I was struggling with that this morning.
Right.
And man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I needed it.
Interesting.
I definitely needed it.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of power in prayer, whether it's placebo or it's, I don't know. There's, it's something I believe in. It's something that I do on the regular. So,
well, and I think as a Christian, my beliefs, I don't believe that I cannot and have not, and I never can bring someone to Christ in the sense of, God brings, in my mind, at least how I rationalize how I read through Scripture and I process through is, God brings people to himself, and he partners with us to help have those conversations with them, to help them process his reality.
Yeah. So, well, and here's the thing about this too. Like, if the harder you try, the more that's you.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? The harder you try, and that's why you and I, we don't try to convince each other of anything. We just have these conversations from different viewpoints, and that's why we get along so well when it comes to those conversations. That other people, conversations like this have started wars.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if we're being honest, but it's that ego that does that, and we don't do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and my belief is that, if Christ is God, he is more than capable of proving himself to you.
Yeah.
I don't have to prove Jesus is real to you.
No.
The only thing that I can do, but at the same time, I also don't want to take the full cop out, in my opinion, of, well, that just means I don't even have to share my faith with people. I think it's important to talk through faith with people and where you stand. Absolutely. And that's why I appreciate you. And like, I asked this question of you, of where are you at in your faith? Because I think it's important. Right. I think it's good conversation. It's good to know. It's good and to be respectful in where they're at. So, and I think it's important to have those conversations because, but anyway.
Well, and where people are at with their lives parallels a lot of times with their spirituality. Yeah. It very much parallels, I don't care how religious or spiritual you are or aren't. If you are going through some sort of just terrible thing in your life, you're going to turn to spirituality and faith on some level. I don't care who you can, and people can say they don't, but they do. Right. Like people will randomly show up to a random church because they're so lost spiritually that they need help, and there's something to that. I mean, obviously there's something to the getting mental health help as well, but there's just huge healing that happens within some sort of spirituality, wherever you find it, So I believe in that pretty strongly too.
Yeah. I mean, the sheer amount of friends that I had before I was a Christian who have reached out to me post me becoming a pastor, and they know I'm a pastor now.
Right.
Who've reached out to me and been like, hey, like, I just need something. And you're the only person I can think of that can help me.
Yeah.
And so absolutely. And wherever. Yeah. But anyway.
And I know, and you and I have talked too, like the first time that I was invited to listen to you preach, because you had been doing it for for a little while now. Yeah. Before I was invited to come listen to you preach. And I know we've talked about that because I know there was a fear that, that I would judge or I would, disagree or I would call you out on something different. And I tell you what, when I went and watched you preach the first time, like I was crying. We're talking about being criers because I was so dang proud of you just standing up there with confidence and, this was you. This wasn't, you just trying to, pacify, past decisions or anything like that. This is part of who you were, and you were so good at it. I was like a proud dad down there, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shoot, you probably did most of the raising of me growing up. No, that's, I remember that. And there had been another time where I had happened to have been in Alliance, but you had to work and you weren't able to get it off or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And then the next time I had come, it was a few years in. Yeah. And it just happened to be when I itinerate at a place, I usually would share my testimony, my story of coming to Christ early on. I would share that a lot just to kind of get the churches familiar with who I am.
Right.
Now, the first time I visit a church, I'll share my story, but most of the churches in this region, I mean, I'm preaching at a Baptist church in July. I preach in all different denominations. It's not just my own denomination. I've preached in all of these churches, and so now I'm sharing more of other people's stories that have partnered with us, come along and have found Christ in our ministry.
Right.
Or, every year we share that every single year we have somebody who comes to us and says, "Hey, I was seriously considering taking my life."
Yeah.
But you stepped in, and Jesus, Chi Alpha.
Right.
But and we have.
See, and I'm a big believer in where we are where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be there.
Shout out. I'm going to briefly, maybe we'll end on this, but one of my former students, Jack, you met Jack, didn't you? He came in Thanksgiving or Christmas with us. I don't remember which holiday.
Yeah, it was one of those.
It was a holiday. You got to meet him.
They meld together because we have such a good time and everybody's cry laughing and it's a good time.
Yes. So when we have students who don't want to go home or can't go home,
right,
and don't have don't have a place to go, we invite them to our family holiday.
Yeah.
I think just this last year we had Cam from Hawaii.
Yeah. And they're like family. We have a good old time. They just fit right in. And
I love it. I love it when a student will come.
Yeah. I get excited too. I always ask Tanner, I'm always like, you bringing any international students? You bringing students with you this time? And, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't.
Yeah.
We like having them.
Yeah. It just depends on the year. Like right now we don't have any students. All of our students live near. All of our students live near, but they're able to go home or have other things. Or I think this last one we did invite one, but he ended up having to work on the day, and so he didn't.
Right. Yeah.
But Jack, shout out to him. I know he listens to the show. He loves this. And so one of these days, if he ever comes back to visit Shadron, he's going to be on the podcast because he's got some fun stories from before he became a Christian. But part of his testimony, and I don't want to share anything that he wouldn't feel comfortable sharing, but part of his story was that he had tried to, and then like an hour after he had unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
I reached out to him and was like, "Hey, you need to come to Chi Alpha tomorrow." I didn't say, "Hey, buddy,
right,
how's it going?" I was like, "Hey, man, I don't know what it is."
You didn't say, "Hey, you need to come."
It was
visit with Jesus, and it was none of that. It was like
12:30 in the morning. I just felt like I needed to text him. I reached out and I was like, "Hey, come to Chi Alpha tomorrow. You just need to come." That's all it was.
Yeah.
And he's like, "All right, I'll be there."
I mean, we get those gut feelings. Yeah. We act on them.
And then as our stories intertwined and I shared my faith with him and his background, and there was some similarities and there was some identity that, we were able to find common ground on and all this other stuff. But then eventually he got baptized in Chi Alpha and he was just telling me the other day, he's like, "Man, my life is so dramatically different."
Yeah.
And it's so great, but it's those moments like you're talking about where there's crisis but what are the chances? What are the odds that I would text him at 12:30 in the morning when he's literally at the lowest point of his life?
because you wouldn't do that any other time, but you have no way to know that was going on. I know it's such a there's just too much coincidence in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To say that we're on this rock floating around in space and there's nothing more to it.
Right. The sheer coincidences can only be coincidences until they begin to multiply.
Yeah.
If you have one of those experiences in your life, coincidence. But when it's yearly, weekly, monthly, like when it's regularly, those coincidences happen, you start to recognize that, man, there's something behind all of this.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've always told my kids too, like if we're running late or something's going on where we can't do what we plan to do, I always tell them, I'm like, hey, I think God maybe had a different plan for us. He's keeping us safe. I can't count the times where I was driving somewhere and we're running late and I'm getting frustrated where I just tell myself that. Yeah. First of all, it calms me down. Yeah. Second of all, I'll cruise up on an accident where I'm like, we might have been in that accident. Like for instance, so we don't have our buddy Phyllis here for this episode, but he there might be a reason why he's not here. Maybe if he'd have been here, rushed over here to be on time, maybe he would have gotten an accident or something terrible would have happened. So I always look at it as there's a reason for everything.
Or maybe this was not the plan.
No, not at all. We went on a tangent,
and I really valued this. And so I hope that somebody out there is listening to this and they get the same value out of it, because it was awesome.
Yeah. But, and then maybe it's one of those right place at the right time. Yeah. Maybe somebody needed to hear this today.
Right. So with that, man, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. And on your Discord, on the Discord, or on the wherever you're listening to this podcast, comment, going back to the beginning.
Oh yeah, we'll have great conversations.
Comment your aha moment, pet peeve thing with a squeaky green beans, or what was the important the thing that bothers you. We genuinely want to hear them, but don't forget, and we love you, and okay, bye.
Ancient days of giants, when the earth was wild and free, a creature roamed the valleys, cloaked in mystery. Is he born of angels' blood and man, a Nephilim so tall, or a shadow of the fallen, yet heeding the Maker's call? He's a biblically accurate Bigfoot, with a lineage from the skies. Not a myth or legend, but a truth that never dies. Is he a remnant of the Nephilim, a titan standing tall? Or does he have the word of God upon him, the last to hear the call?